There's one more thing that we need to just add real quick, and that's our name, right? So you're familiar now with how to get text in the title block, and really at this point, I just want to copy this down. So I'm going to do a CO, and I'm going to grab it. Doesn't really matter where. I'm just going to grab it and yank it down here, and double click it. So if you need to edit your text, you double click it, and it activates the text box. So here I'm going to say Kevin Grenling. Click outside of the box to finish it off, and I actually got that pretty close to the middle, but I think I just got to shimmy it down a little bit like that. Now I got to move it up. There we go. So Kevin Grenling, ARC 121. I am going to title my sheet up here and put a number on my sheet, but I'm going to do that live in the actual file that I reference this into, because my name isn't going to change and the class isn't going to change, at least not yet. So, how do we link it in? It's actually pretty simple. When you have what's called an X reference in AutoCAD, it's short for an external reference drawing, and that drawing is not saved. It's not saved as anything special. It's just saved as another drawing file. So real quick, I'm going to go back to my original one, just make sure that file is saved. Then I'm going to go back to my new file, and I'm going to save it in a location that makes sense. So for me, I'm just going to put it in exactly the same folder as the other file is in, box drawings. So this one I'm going to call box assignment title block. And save it. So it saves as a DWG file. It's just another drawing. There's nothing special about how it's saved. The only thing that's special about it is how you reference it into the file. So here is my file, and here's the first layout I want to put it on. And what we need to do is go up to the Insert tab, and go to Attach under Reference. So we click on Attach. Yeah. We navigate to the location that you just saved it. And make sure that you're searching for the proper file type. So it defaulted to an image file, and I want a drawing file. And there it is, box assignment title block. And when you hit open, a whole bunch of settings come up. But you can see here that, that is my title block. That's the one I want that you're seeing in the little preview. So let's very quickly kind of go through what each of these different setting types does. The reference type is essentially how it behaves on the page. So an attachment behaves like any other object that you've drawn in digital space. It occupies three-dimensional land, whatever it is, or real estate. An overlay will always be on top of the information that you've linked or that you've drawn in your file. So it'll always, if you're going with gradients and shading and stuff like that, that information, if you set it up as an overlay, will block out other drawing information. Scale is pretty self-explanatory. The X direction is 1:1, Y is 1:1, Z is 1:1. You can scale it all three. If you want to make it twice as large, then you set all these to 2. The insertion point, you can specify where you want the insertion point to go, or you can input it yourself. I will say that the insertion point gets a little funky when you're trying to actually set up a very seamless point, and that's because the margin, well, I'll explain that in a second actually. So, and then path type is just saying, are you guys familiar with what a path is in like file organization? Okay, so the path type is about where the file is going to be getting its reference. Is it going to read is it going to read the position of the reference from where it currently lives? So, for instance, the file path here. There we go. So the file path here, because they're in the same folder, is just a one level. It's same folder. That's the file path. Or you can change it to the full path, which is saying that I'm going to read exactly where this file lives all the way down to which drive it's on. So the reason that this is significant is because if you send a file to someone, you want it to be all relative path, because they don't have your C drive or your D drive or your F drive or your X drive. If you send them a file and it's set to full path, it won't read the reference because it doesn't know where it is. Making sense a little bit? Possibly? That's okay. As long as you understand it conceptually, that's fine. You can rotate it, and this is just telling you what the scale factor is going to be. So, I will turn off, well, I'll do specify on screen actually.
So it should be no relative path?
Yeah, relative path.
I cannot do it, so...
You guys can't do relative path?
No.
Did you guys do insert instead of attach?
No, we don't have to.
You did attach? You select the file, you hit open, you can't do relative path? Alright, well I'll troubleshoot that in a second, but let me just finish off the point here real fast and say, when you hit OK, this is what happens. Oh, look at that, it's really tiny. That's odd. That's very, very odd. Alright, well I'll troubleshoot that. But maybe I should just stop and fix that first. So hold on a second. So where we were kind of going wrong with the path issue, at least I think this is the case. It seems if you're saving it to your own drive, it'll work. For some reason, I think you're not able to set up an active link to the drives that are hosted with the school. That's at least it seems to be wherever you're saving it to the S drive, we can't do a relative path. We have to do a full path. That's fine. I was only presenting that to you as a best practice so that when you encounter it in your life somewhere down the road, you'll know that relative path is truly what you want in most cases. So just a real quick recap here. No, not that. Sorry. I'm going to attach. I'm going to bring in my title block. Oh, wait, I need to save it first. So I had a scale issue on mine. Mine was coming through really small, and that was because my units were set to feet. So when it read in the other file, one of them was in feet, the other one was in inches. So there was a scale issue. So I switch it back to inches, hit OK, save it. Then I go back into my file, and I go to attach. Select the file, hit open. So real quick recap. Reference type is just about whether or not you have something over your drawing or as a part of your drawing. I will say most of the time you want attachment. Scale typically is going to be 1-to-1 in almost all cases unless you have a very specific reason not to. The insertion point I'll get at in just a second. Basically says you can predefine where it enters onto the page, or you can just click somewhere on the page or type it in yourself. Path type, we just went through that. Angle is about where it's going to rotate when you place it. And then you hit OK. So the point that I want to make about the insertion point here is that take a look at where my title block is compared to my crosshair. right? So I move it around. My crosshair is all the way in the bottom left corner of my sheet outline that I created on my title block file. And that's because if you specify on screen, your insertion point is going to be the origin of the file that you're referencing. So I happen to draw my my title block with a sheet border, and I placed it at the origin, right? So that origin is supposed to go right there, right? And so you would think when I type in 0, 0 that that's where it's going to go, but it's not. So when I type in 0, 0 to place it at what I think is the origin, that's where it goes. Yeah, it should be misaligned. So if you guys got it aligned, then that's probably good news for you. But the thing is that the sheet doesn't necessarily share the same origin, and in fact the margins of the sheet also offset the origin. So that actually did something different than even I would have anticipated. So I'm wondering, the plot offset is fine. Weird. Letter. Alright, well, I'll dig into that. But what I expected it to do, and what it used to do all the time, is this. It would place it right here. Yeah, so it did that for you? So it must just be a setting or something. What I'm used to it doing, and I don't know why I placed it where it placed it, but it places it at the zero origin at the inside of your margin. So the margin needs to be accounted for if you're going to have a full title block set. Now, is it really worth your time to do that, especially at this stage? No, it's not. So, I drop it at the origin, and I give myself usually a pretty generous border margin on my sheet. So a 1/2 inch is actually pretty large. Usually it'll be something like a 1/4 inch max. In some cases 3/16 of an inch from the edge of the page. But because printers are a little bit funny, and the file format oftentimes has different size margins, I give it a 1/2 inch now for educational things. And then you can just drop it on the corner approximately, and that should suit your purposes just fine. All right, so the last thing here is the viewport. The viewport right now sits on the outside of the title block, and for me, I like to move it in as close as possible to the object that I'm showing, just to keep it clean and not annoying. And then I can kind of just move it and shimmy it into approximately a centerized location. So that said, what I would like you to do here before we move on to the next set of settings, I guess, is create or drop in and insert your title block on all of your sheet layouts, and then clean up your views to fit. In some cases, I'm thinking when I bring this one over to the next sheet, it might get really tight because those can be kind of wide. So I'm going to drop this here at the origin. I copied it and I pasted it on. Move this over a little. Move this over a little. And that's good to go. Okay? So spend a little bit of time getting that on all your sheets, and then we'll move forward from there. Are there any questions?